McGrath comes in, it's on its way, it's there! The miracle on grass!
Owen with a kick to full forward, Cloak, not quite, Blair, Collingwood back in front.
The scene, he delays the give, Franklin, this is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman! Poor fans can't bear to watch. They led by 28 points at one stage, but the perfect storm has erupted. Oh, who else? McDonald!
The cap of the season has come and gone. Oh man, I'm already off to a hot start. You didn't like that pun? I wasn't even planning on that, but oh man, I wish you had said that. No, I already kind of ruined this. I should have just said and gone with it like I planned the whole time. It would make me seem a lot smarter. But ladies and gentlemen, oh man, the granny has passed us, and for the first time since 1964, the Melbourne Demons are premiers. The last time, right? Wasn't that right? The last time they won the minor premier, they're also premiers.
I believe so.
History struck again. History struck again. And this was not only just a really good game for 2.5 terms, for 2.5 quarters there. It was just really exciting, man. This was a really fun game. At least, oh man, that second quarter was probably one of the best quarters of footy I've ever seen. That stuff was fantastic. But we got a little bit to get into, not only with what happened in this game, what went right for the Dees and what went wrong for the Dogs here, but also going to take a look at the rest of the finals, take a little recap there, give our best game, our biggest surprise, and also our biggest disappointment. Before we get into things, thank you so much for everyone that was able to tune in to our live stream over on twitch.tv/Fourth and Long Radio. I know we were able to stream for the whole thing. I had to leave, had some big old sports weekend to fly out to, and so that was a whole hell of a lot of fun. I'm glad my voice was gone this morning. I tried to get a couple sentences out to my girlfriend when I woke up, and nothing came out. So we're doing a lot better now. Did a lot of cheering at that Broncos game, so I'm glad we are ready to go. But Donnie, just before we get into things, general thoughts about the game. Like, how are you feeling coming off of it?
Oh, there's part of me that's thoroughly excited for Dees supporters. The few Dees supporters that I chat with on Twitter, I said before the game, I said I wish you luck. did that for both the Dees and the Doggies supporters, but so happy for the Dees supporters to get that long elusive premiership. So many years of not being able to be there in hardship and difficulties to see the Dees get this magical season. I mean, there's a little bit of sweetness to it, that the fact that they can't win it in Victoria and have a bulk of their Victorian fans be able to see it, but it was still an absolutely spectacular game. It's hard to argue that the Dees were not the best team the entire season, so they're a very, very deserving premier after this season.
Well, I have to say it's a perfect cap to a dominant season that the Dees had here. And like you said, just going through, scrolling through Twitter and all that stuff, seeing all the stuff from the Dees and Dees supporters, I'm not a supporter of the Dees. I don't care about them, quite frankly, in this kind of relational sense. But man, even I was getting goosebumps from those. And so it was just a really, really great thing to see here. Of course, you feel bad for those Doggy fans. Poor Jalen, but part of self-interest, I'm happy that the Dogs lost, just so Jalen, of course, our other host here, he wasn't able to see his team win the grand final before mine, so I still have that going for me. They'll probably be back next year before the Giants here, but there's a chance. But it's just really great, and so let's get on to things. Of course, I'm your host, Ross Allen, joined alongside the Fourth Long AFL correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess, and we're here to kind of tell you everything you need to know about the 2021 AFL Grand Final. And this was just a really well-played game. It was a real close margin. The Dees get out to a solid start. The Dogs kind of fight their way back, and by the halfway through the second quarter, they're chipping their way and trading back and forth leads right there. Doggies take the lead going to halftime. They look great. But then we get to this point about low past the halfway mark in the third. And since that point, the Dees outscored the Doggies 100 to 7. I believe they won like 9, 10, like 12 goals in a row. In the last about quarter and a half of play, the Dogs only had 1 goal. They had a handful of behinds there, but they had 1 goal and 1 behind after in a quarter and a half.
I recall correctly from that moment, Caleb Daniels threw Max Gawn out of bounds. It was 16 goals 1 to 1 goal 6, I think it was, after that point. So it was a 100 points even to, I think it was 6 or 7. It's a ridiculous stat line
How's that?
that the D's just absolutely obliterated the Dogs after that.
And they did it with everything. Not only were they just real good on offense, their midfield game was great. Max Gawn, of course, excellent in this one. I mean, you want to talk about Christian Petrarca. Of course, we all know how good he was in this game. But then also in there, you got to talk about Ben Brown. I mean, first off, Ben Brown going from the worst team in the league to winning a flag the next year. That's some fantastic stuff. And then Bailey Fritsch with 6 goals in this one, 6 and 2 in total. Just like from the stars, from top down, it was just a perfect game all around by this Dees team. And really, you couldn't change a thing. Like you might be able to change a couple like details here and there, but it was almost as perfect as you can get, which is just remarkable.
Just an incredible game. Just the game plan worked perfectly, and the lack of a solid ruck for the Doggies really got exposed as Gawn started dominating, and then when Petrarca and Oliver were just everywhere. Considering Petrarca wins the Norm Smith, has 39 disposals. At one time, he had 40, and they took one away. He would have been the first ever player to get 40 disposals in a grand final. Now he'll have to settle for 39, but I don't think Petrarca will mind, considering a Norm Smith and a flag, I think, are more than enough keepsakes for him. But this was literally a game where the D's offense, which I think has always kind of been their heel a little bit, especially late in the season, where they were struggling or they weren't kicking goals, really kind of blew up at just the right time. Fritsch goes nuts. Petrarca starts kicking goals. Oliver's everywhere.
Now, do you think there's something that like sparked that, or is that just the team kind of getting the crap together?
Some people, like I said, some people would say Caleb Daniels throwing Max Gawn down and that point there midway through the third quarter. And some people said
maybe just the offensive boom it late in the season too. Like, what do you think got them going?
I think it's a little bit of, as I said in our podcast when Ben Brown came in, I said, I think Ben Brown is going to be a stabilizer because he's a consistent goal kicker. He gives you a target. He's not a massive hanging pack mark type of guy, but he can make contests, and with his length, he can be able to get it down to guys like Fritsch and Keziah Pickett and Spargo, guys that are really good ground level players. And I think it really sparked the rest of the team. It gave McDonald a little bit of a leeway because McDonald didn't have the best defender on him like he had there for a while during the middle of the season when he was kicking a ton of goals. Defenders were sagging off him and having to help take away Brown because Brown's so consistent in goal kicking. Bailey Fritsch took a little bit. I think in the long run, this game really kind of showed that there's a ton of still depth on this Melbourne forward line, and it's still young. The scary part about this Melbourne team is their age bracket is right in that time where there's people even saying, could this be the start of the next dynasty? You had the Tigers dynasty winning 4 and 5. The D's have the right age bracket with most of their players. You could see 2, 3, 4 champion potential flags here from this group in the next 5 to 6 years if they can stay together, if they can stay healthy. Again, that's a massive if, especially right now, considering we have an entire off season. We don't know what trade's going to be like. We don't know what injuries are going to be like. I mean, each season is its whole new box of chocolates per se. So, but it is kind of funny how quickly already people are like, well, could we see the next dynasty? Could the D's be the next dynasty? There's a possibility. Again, there's way too many variables right now that I even want to think about.
It's a long off season.
we haven't even been 4 days away from these guys being champions, and there's already people talking about a dynasty. Little premature, but
I did love the tweet saying that it's now been 57 hours since the D's won won the premiere.
Yeah, they're definitely having a lot of fun with it. But this was just a masterclass game
Mm-hmm.
of ruck domination and how a midfield that has a couple of bulls and Oliver and Petrarca can win you a footy game, no matter what type of team you're playing. I mean, I think everybody went in going, the Dogs have the best midfield in the entire competition with Trelaw and Dunkley and Hunt and McRae and Bontempelli. And there's no way to argue that Bontempelli was the Norm Smith, had the Norm Smith in his back pocket halfway through that third quarter until
Yeah.
Gawn, Petrarca, and Oliver took the game over. And that's really the reason why Petrarca ended up winning the Norm Smith, was because they took the game by the scruff of its neck, said, "You're coming with me," and they went for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no stopping the D's once they got going. And I would even I would say the attrition of the travel on the Dogs, I think, really showed in the fourth quarter, because their legs were gone. They could not put up the fight I think a lot of people expected from them. Even with the 2 week break between the preliminary final and the grand final,
Mm-hmm.
the travel got to them. They had no legs late in the fourth quarter, and it was obvious. And the D's were literally in fuego at that time.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things here as well. So, did the D's end up having the better midfield, or was it just that defense that did the Melbourne midfield actually outplay the D's mid or the Doggies midfield, or is it more just better defense and clamping them down? And then also, does what Max Gawn has shown this entire season prove that maybe the ruck is almost a underutilized or maybe a bit of an underrated position?
There's so many different ways you could take it. You could say that the D's, from that point on, from that midway through the third quarter to the end of the game, they did.
Mm-hmm.
The D's outplayed the midfield of the Doggies. But I would also give a lot of credence to what you said. I think Max Gone sometimes in the ruck is undervalued their impact on a game, because you saw that one of the things that really sparked this was two or three tap downs were Gone taps it to a Petrarca and Oliver, who then are right on towards goal and could either kick goals or kick it to leading forwards. And there was nothing the Doggies defense can do.
No, but
The
it's
new
those little
six,
plays. It's those little detail things just by just barely hitting a ball, just opening up space. It's those little details that seem really simple and almost easy to do. But if you're able to do it well, like Max Gone is, that opens up their entire offense, and he single-handedly led to goals. I mean, he did. He attributed to a lot of the points, and maybe it did not necessarily everything ended up in points scored, but in goal opportunities. I mean, Max Gone opened up the entire game there.
yeah, it just an incredible performance by an incredible player that I think there were a lot of people kind of going through the fact that Max Gone was one of those players that, if you would have went back about 6 or 7 years ago, you'd have thought he was never going to pan out. He
Mm-hmm.
had two ACL injuries in his first 3 seasons that he played. He wasn't the impact player that he is now. He's changed his game. He's molded his body. He's made himself one of the elite ruckmen, one of several ruckmen that I think can change a game with just a couple of taps in just the right way. And when you've got Oliver and Petrarca to be able to tap it down to, it's a combination that's very difficult to stop, because the Dogs did not have a ruckman that could balance Max Gone out. You can sometimes kind of even Max Gone out a little bit if you play a little bit more of a defensive ruck style, where you take the deep tap or the tap over your behind your head
Mm-hmm.
into the like basically forward for him. If you can at least neutralize that to where the ball's coming straight down in the center circle, there's no win for either. It's really a draw when it comes to the ruck tap, because neither team has the advantage, and it's at the feet of the ruckman. Yeah, you might get another ball up, but at least you keep going from tapping it to the advantage of his midfielders. And uh, God bless Stephen Martin and in English, they tried, but they couldn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it got to the point Gon could literally do whatever he wanted. He could have tapped it any way he wanted to advantage, and there was nothing the Doggies seemed to do, no matter how they changed that impact that Gon had on the game, and that really helped swing it. Now, was it because Caleb Daniels threw him down and Gon got pissed because the little man on the team threw him down? Maybe, I don't know. but it sure seemed like it because Gawn was a completely different rock the rest of the game
Mhm.
after that happened.
I mean, it got to the point where it's not for a lack of effort on the doggies ruckman and on the doggies themselves, but Max Gawn, he's just the best ruck in the league, and there's a bit of a gap between 1 and 2. He's just
Mhm.
that damn good of a player, and he's arguably, I mean, besides Petrarca, if you want to take a look at, he might be the most valuable player on that Melbourne Demons team. He,
It's there. It's really hard to say because I remember I definitely saw that I ruffled a few feathers with my all Australian team
yeah.
with a couple with the YouTube because I had a gentleman get super angry that Clayton Oliver didn't make the team, but
Mhm.
to be honest with you, the grand final performance by Christian Petrarca is my evidence of why I have Petrarca over Oliver.
Mhm.
Petrarca made more of an impact than Oliver did. Petrarca
Mhm.
kicked goals. Petrarca made more plays. Petrarca was the Norm Smith medalist or the
Mhm.
MVP of the grand final. I'm not saying that's completely the evidence because again, it's a whole season, not
Mhm.
just the finals. But I feel a tiny bit more vindicated because I picked the guy that won the Norm Smith
Yeah.
as my representative of the Melbourne midfield.
That you picked the
But
guy that looked the best in the biggest game against the second best team in the league.
and it's hard to argue that. Just what an incredible performance. I mean, Max Gawn showing how the ruck position can change a game if it's done correctly. You don't even have to have a super dominant midfield, but if you got a guy that can tap it into your advantage and midfielders that know how to read his taps, it is incredibly dangerous, especially with the new 6 in each quadrant, where
Mm-hmm.
everybody is man to man right off the bat. So that first tip, you're running into forwards that are one on one on almost everybody.
Yeah. I really think, summing up, it's not like the doggies played poorly. In fact, they looked really good for points there, but things tumbled and they tumbled hard, and the D's they're just clearly, and they proved it, the best team in the AFL this year. And kind of like you're talking about, I mean, maybe they won't be a dynasty, but they're for the foreseeable future, they're going to be heavy contenders and favorites a lot of the time. So they're building something really great here, and I think this game was just a really, really good cap on what was a really fun and exciting season. And I mean, my first full season too. So man, talk about joining at the right time, and one of the most exciting things you could see from round one all the way to the grand final. Just some fantastic stuff here, and of course, like, give us your thoughts, whether it be on the comments or in the on our socials. You can find us on Twitter at Fourth and Long Radio, on Instagram at Fourth and Long Radio. Of course, everything Fourth and Long is at thefourthandlong.com, or for everything footy, thefourthandlong.com/AFL. But before, one thing we want to do here is we kind of did a little bit of our finals breakdown a couple weeks ago here, and just since everything's done and good, we want to give a few things here. Our best game, our biggest surprise, and our biggest disappointment. Donnie, would you like to start us off with your favorite game of the 2021 finals?
And my favorite part about it is it was the first game that we ever streamed, and that was the GWS v
We have the
Sydney
same one?
game. It's hard to it's there were really two, and we streamed both of them, and they were
It
both
was going
one
to be
point
between those two. I
trailers.
knew that for a fact.
But it's hard. It's really hard to argue that the GWS Sydney game I thought was absolutely an incredible game. Just the comeback by Sydney to get back into the game, and just the anguish. Like I said it to a few friends. I said the
Mhm.
anguish on Brad Nye's face on that stream as each behind went through and each opportunity for Sydney to take the lead went through.
Well, it was the
It was
anguish
so
on your face, and
agonizing.
it was the fear on my face. We were both going through sweet wells because Sydney kept on scoring, and the game kept getting closer. But then again, they kept on getting behind, so they weren't getting too close, and like all three of us were just tense.
Oh, just
Oh
but
man,
but an incredible game in
was it
two
five
very
behinds at
very
the end there, right? Five straight
7. It
behind.
was one seven in the
What's it?
final.
Mm,
Yeah, it was hard. It was
that
hard to
was
watch.
scary.
But
I really
but
thought
it
GW
but
was about to blow it.
but it was an incredible game. And the one thing I got to give this year, I know we're gonna do another podcast, kind of going over the entire season.
Yes, we will.
And the
That
one thing
drops
I
next
got to
week.
give the one thing I got to give this year was so many absolutely cracking games. There was
Mm-hmm.
very few rounds that didn't have a game under 10 points. It was baffling to me when I went through it a few weeks ago. Just
Mm-hmm.
looking at some of the results, was like, there are a ton of games that came down to the wire, came down to within 10 points. Just an incredible season.
Couple
And
after
then
the
to get
siren too,
two,
man.
exactly, and then to get two in the finals was absolutely incredible. I would have really loved the grand final to maybe have been a little bit closer, maybe have been one of those tight games, but it's so difficult not to say that the GWS Sydney game was just an incredibly physical, tough, great footy game that I think was just fantastic to watch. I'm hoping that's good vibes for both of our clubs going into next year. We'll have to see.
Fingers crossed. I mean, that game was just everything you wanted, especially in a rivalry game, the third edition of the Sydney Derby of the season. And so, I mean, you have the trilogy. You have two teams that know each other really well, two teams that don't like each other. And just the emotion you can feel in that game, whether it be from Toby Green for GWS or Buddy Franklin getting so close to 1,000 goals in that game, and he looked like he was about to run away with it too early in that one. And so there was momentum shifts. There was, I mean, you had Mumford stepping on everyone, which was always a pretty sight. You had drama, you had controversy, you had everything. It was a perfect game, and man, it was, and like you said, 1 point game where it came down right to the end, and you didn't know who was going to win until that final siren sounded. So I gotta say that was my favorite one there too. And so I mean, just damn, just a damn good game of footy in that one. But next, of course, let's talk biggest surprise, and for my surprise, um, this was a bit of a tough one for me, but I think my biggest surprise here was the lack of competition that we saw in the preliminary finals. It was two games that were just two duds, and where we saw Geelong and Port Adelaide get absolutely blown out. Now with Geelong, I wasn't as surprised. I think they had the most disappointing performance of the finals, or maybe you get that one to Brisbane for losing two in a row there. But then Port Adelaide, the team that, I mean, I'm not bagging on you, but you included, thought that they were going to make it to the grand final. And that was very fair to say. They looked fantastic during the regular season. And they get to this point again where back-to-back years now, they blow it in the preliminary finals. And so I thought that was very disappointing in my opinion.
See, I'm gonna throw a blanket. My most disappointing. You pretty much said all three of them. My most disappointing were three teams of the finals was the Brisbane Lions, because they had played so well to get into fourth, and they fall in straight sets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, the second game against the Western Bulldogs was quite an incredible game, but even still, straight sets.
Yep.
The Geelong Cats, because again, they find a way to absolutely stuff up another finals appearance by just falling apart at the worst possible time. And in a game, there was, yes, they were playing the Dees. Yes, the Dees were one of the best teams. Yes, they're the champions, but I was expecting so much more out of the Geelong. I thought the Geelong Dees game was going to be the best game of the preliminary finals, legitimately. And the Port Adelaide Power, again, for, I mean, literally stepping on their own feet at the almost optimal time to get to a grand final. You're the only team that's playing at home. You're the only team that's going to have the home crowd advantage, and you absolutely stuff it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was ridiculous how bad Port Adelaide. Like, I don't. I hate the narrative that they were overlooking the Doggies, but if you go back and watch the game, it was almost as if Port Adelaide kind of went in that game thinking, well, we should win. We're going to win this. And the Doggies, they're not going to put up a fight. We're going to go to the grand final. And the Doggies punched him in the mouth, and Port went, uh-oh. But they then never responded. It was the most inept performance I have seen. Yeah, anticlimactic is kind of perfect too, but it was inept. Like, I could not believe what I was watching. Like, we that was the one we watched, and I was sitting there going, where is the Port Adelaide performance that happened in the first game of the finals? Like, where was that? Like, it was not there. So I hate blanketing saying three teams, but all three of those teams, in my opinion, were the most disappointing, because they all had just brain fades at the worst possible time. It's absolutely insane. And to see Geelong's kind of coaching staff implode now ever after that game
Yeah.
is kind of insane. Like Matty Scarlett leaves, another couple of their coaches leave. So it's just, I'm interested to see how Geelong's coaching staff looks next season after a bomb out in the finals. And it sounded like it caused a few rifts amongst their coaching staff that led to a few guys not returning next season.
Yeah. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Now, with a little bit of positivity, let's talk surprise. And to me, given that they were 0-3 and they weren't looking good going to the finals, and admittedly, I did think that they were the scariest team in the finals and probably one of the most unpredictable ones in terms of possibility of success. But the Western Bulldogs surprised a lot of people because, like I said, they were limping into the finals here. Then they just rattle off a big win against Essendon, a really well played close game against the Brisbane Lions. They blow Port Adelaide out of the water, and they come, at least through most of the game, they came really close to winning a flag as a non-top 4 team, which almost never happens. So I have to give a lot of credit to the Doggies for showing true resilience and grit, and for not giving up on the season there at the end, because they played fantastic and had an absolutely amazing year this season.
All right. So my surprise is how to explain this. It's a surprise for me, but it's the reasoning for my surprise that it's gonna
Okay.
throw a few people off. My surprise is the Melbourne Demons, and let me explain here.
Yes.
My surprise is because the offensive juggernaut that showed up for the Dees in this finals was not something any of us saw, at least from round 12 on this season. The scoring that they did, again, Max Gawn kicking 5 in the preliminary finals, Bailey Fritsch kicking 6 in the grand final, is not something you could prepare for. So that's why it surprised me, because this has been a Melbourne Demons club over the last 3 years that has been, shall we say, less than accurate kicking goals. Them and the Brisbane Lions were two of the teams that led the league the last few years in behinds kicked because they weren't accurate goal kickers. So for me, the surprise is how dominant offensively the D's became as this finals progressed. It was shocking in a good way. To see this team that I think everybody said the defense is fantastic, and that's great. But if you can't score, you can't win. So I knew one of the things that I got on the D's about is that their inconsistency scoring might hurt them in the finals. And boy, did they find it at the right possible time. So my surprise is the D's offensive output in the finals, because they exploded at just the right time. And that is one of the big reasons why they are now the premiers of 2021.
I love it. I mean, that first statement will catch everyone, but like you said, the explanation really did it in. And I mean, we all knew that their defense was going to be great. Offense, a huge question, but I think they passed that test, Donnie. You think? Did they pass that one?
Well, and the other thing too is, did you hear the story that came out connected to the defense that I think a lot of people are still kind of shaking their heads and fascinatingly surprised about? Remember, I was telling you, Stephen May came into this grand final with an injury cloud, right?
Yep.
They diagnosed later that he actually did tear his hamstring early in the second quarter, and he played through it. He has a 7-centimeter tear in his hamstring. So they don't know if it was a slight tear and they didn't catch it during the scans during the off season, but during the 2 weeks off, they said, but he played most of the game with a hamstring tear because he didn't want to come off, because he knew that they didn't have the defensive replacement as their injury sub. So Stephen May played with a torn hamstring for most of that game.
Now, that's not a strain. That's not a sprain. That is a torn ligament.
A torn hamstring.
Yep, that is a torn ligament that essentially holds your leg together.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That
what an animal!
Yep, I kid you not. Stephen May, one of their best defenders. They later came out. It later came out over the. It's come out like the last couple of weeks that he basically played most of that game with a torn hamstring. It's come out over the last few days that he basically played on because he knew that there was no way they would be able to play as good a defense if he came off. Yeah, the
What a
secret weapon.
beast!
Yeah, absolutely
Man, give
insane.
him the Norm Smith.
Yeah, in the second quarter, I heard it in quote from an article on the in the second quarter, I heard it again. Yeah, a solid tear. Described it as a solid tear. The star defender knew he had done something against the Cats, but had wanted to be given the scan. Chose not to be told the result, so he actually had it even going into the final. So,
What an animal! I don't think people understand, like, the amount of pain that causes is ridiculous. And for him to still have mobility in that, too?
the good thing was that most of that second part of the second half in the fourth quarter, the
They're on
ball was
offense.
mostly on the other side of the field.
Right.
So he it probably wasn't as bad. It might have been much worse if the Duggies had kept that close.
Oh, but man,
But
that alone, that is one of the stories of the
it's
season.
the only thing that scares me a tiny bit with that though is that did he do any more damage to it, and will this affect him going into next season? We'll have to see about that.
Really, something like that shouldn't
It's a
take
great
too long.
it's a great Iron Man story. It's a
Mm-hmm.
great playing through pain story. I mean, you and I are hockey people. I mean, we hear stories all the time. A guy breaks his leg but stays on the ice
Finishes
for a
the
shift
shift.
before he comes off, and then he's done for the season. But he played
Mm-hmm.
through a broken leg. All that.
Right, you see guys
It's
with
those
torn
stories
ACLs, everything broken.
exactly.
It's ridiculous. I mean, like some of the
But
lists, like even like football and stuff like that. The list of injuries you get that people play through is just some things are mind boggling. So hats
mhm.
off here. That's one hell of a story, right?
Yeah, but the only worry I would say is that will it affect his off season because of the fact that the finals goes late enough
Mm-hmm.
that will it affect his preseason? He probably will get scans, will probably get surgery if
Mm-hmm.
necessary. He should be back, but that's the only thing that I question sometimes with that
Mm-hmm.
is will it affect his career
Of course.
long term? But it would an incredible performance
Mm-hmm.
for him to play that on and be still a pretty darn good effective
Yeah.
player in most of that grand final when he did have to have
Mm-hmm.
the footy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he might be delayed in his progress, but the end of the day, he won the flag. So ultimately, that's the goal of 99% of these footballers out here. So, hey, he got it done, and that's ultimately what matters. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on our 2021 Grand Final recap. I mean, a lot of really great stuff going on. Of course, like Donnie mentioned, we will be doing our 2021 season recap. That drops next week. And so there's going to be a lot to talk about there. But like I said, I would love to hear all your thoughts when it comes to the final, to the grand final, the finals themselves, your biggest surprise or disappointment. Also, what was your favorite game of the finals? Because I mean, there is a few that you can really choose from. I'm sure you Dees fans, I know what you're going to choose. So feel free to chime in still. But Donnie, with just one word or phrase to sum up the grand final this year.
Exhilarating. What
Mm.
an exhilarating final. Just absolutely electric. Western Australia, take a bow. You did the grand final proud. What an incredible the performances were good. Again, I'm not a halftime person, but Birds of
It's
Tokyo, nice
respect,
job.
yeah, for what it was,
I
it's
didn't
good.
hear every single note of that, but I still thought it was an incredible performance. The pregame performances that I saw looked absolutely fantastic. The game was absolutely
Mm-hmm.
electric. It's so much fun. Again, the final score a little bit misleading to how good the Doggies really are. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of a closer game than it really was, but just
100%.
an exhilarating grand final and another good one to chalk up in a 2021 season with a ton of headaches, but they got through it. And that's the one thing I got to say.
You did
Congratulations,
it.
AFL. You got through that.
Hey,
That was
round of applause.
absolutely
Round of applause for
insane.
them.
Yeah. A
Oh
round of
yeah.
applause to the AFL and to all their staff for being able to get this entire season through without really any hiccups.
That's fantastic. But Going to be a lot of stuff to talk about come next week, so hope you stay tuned, enjoy, and like I said, you can stay up to date with all of our stuff by following us on our socials, or just going to our website, thefourthandlong.com, or thefourthandlong.com/AFL. We did it, ladies and gentlemen. We got through it, and we had one hell of a time doing it. I hope you all enjoyed this year's Grand Final, and can't wait to see you next week when we break down the entire season. So, of course, that's going to be a blast.